And let's move on to the unit type that we talked about a lot while talking about elephants, which is pikes. And how pikes are currently imbalanced. Anybody wants to take it away to start with?
I would like to touch on something about it. Pikes for me, especially because I was playing at a really high MS. I know this isn't really game balance, and there's a ton of things we're going to talk about pikes throughout this. But at my MS, pikes, even when I played them, were OP, right? Like either I was lagging and the guy didn't see me put him down, or I was going to attack someone who had him up, and my MS was like, nope, they're actually down. So that was really frustrating. Another thing that was super frustrating on him, I get that like there's no real pike commander. I mean, there is in Leonidas and there isn't. But just using rapid advance on them as, if you're barbarians, it's no issue at all, right? But if you're playing heavy Roman infantry, it will literally outrun you, run you down from behind and stab you in the butt. And you can't do anything about it, really. I mean, I guess you could outplay it, right? But I mean, that was when I was at 60 MS, right? Again, I can't just turn around and charge the guy while he's rapid advancing me in a split second to get into combat anymore because I'm playing at really high MS.
Yeah, for me, the main issue with pikes is that the counter to pikes, right? If you encounter a pike unit, you need to flank it, you need to route it, right? Hit them from behind, or also again with combined arms. But it's very similar to how the issue is with elephants. In order to defeat a pike player, you usually need more than one player of your own team because there's no like a direct counter to pikes. If you walk up to them with javelins, raise shields or fight in the shade if they're on Leonidas. They want, well, if it's Leonidas, 100% missile block chance, goodbye. If it's raise shields, they're gonna have close to 100, or maybe even depending on a pike unit, they will have 100. So yeah, you always need combined arms to deal with pikes, and it's also still very difficult because the theory, right, is okay, you walk up to them with a melee unit and a ranged unit to one pike unit. So it's already 2v1 at least that you need to deal with them. You have the ranged unit start firing onto the pike unit, so it is forced into raise shields, right? Then you attack with a melee unit, so it is forced to go pike phalanx, and it's very easy to go pike phalanx. Well, the melee player on the enemy team needs to be very wary of when the pikes are dropped and avoid the pike phalanx, so withdraw before the phalanx is dropped on him, but also needs to get close enough to force the pike player to use the pike phalanx. So it is way harder for the player trying to outplay the pike phalanx to outplay it than the pike phalanx to basically play perfectly. So after let's say the melee player succeeded, pikes are dropped into pike phalanx. So then a ranged unit can start actually chipping in and dealing damage, but also if it's just from the front, the missile block is still pretty high, but you can start doing some damage. So then the player either just keeps taking damage from the ranged unit, which takes a lot of time to kill, or he goes again into raise shields, and then you have that few seconds of opportunity to charge in before he can switch to pike phalanx again. And the problem here, and it's very easy to fix, well, it wouldn't be the entire fix, but the problem itself is very easy to fix. Just increase the window. So if the pike player changes from raise shields to pike phalanx or vice versa, instead of it being a 6-second window, and it's not also always because it depends on when they use the abilities, whatever. It's too much details. Basically increase the window and make it always be that window to, I don't know, 10 seconds instead of being 6, and also not always it being 6. So that the melee player that has to coordinate with a ranged player, they actually have some kind of outplay potential that is more reliable than playing everything perfectly. While the pike player has a very easy time of countering that, even if it's 2v1. Another issue, right, is if you don't have a ranged unit, how do you deal with that? Well, you need to flank and route them. But the way pike phalanx units, first melee detection and also unit coherency, which we're also going to touch upon later. How it works is that once the pikes start spinning, their flanks are all over the place. And either you get lucky and you suddenly start flanking him and he routes, or you get unlucky and even though you clearly flanked him and surrounded him, he doesn't get flanked at all for some reason. Because how flanking detection works is also not very reliable. So let's say you attack the pike unit from its side. You have 10 men in the front row, and 9 of them are hitting the pike from the side, but one of them is hitting them from the front, and the game can be like, that's not a flank because there's one guy hitting them from the front. So I'm not going to count that, and that unit is not going to rout. Such a thing happens. And it goes into overdrive once the unit starts spinning and it's all over the place and no longer has a clearly defined front, left, right, and rear flank. It just becomes a sort of like circle of just a mob, a random circle of whatever the hell the units are. And you can flank that and it just keeps spinning and killing you. And he was like, oh, come on, I'm surrounding him. Fucking route already. And the pike's like, nope. Spin go brrr. And your rings go brrr as well.
Well, I think another thing too, right?
Fixed, yeah, essentially.
The amount of control they give too is like, on a point, you're going to hold a point really well with them. Heck, you could just make a triangle with the things on most points.
Or
in a city,
wall. You can literally just keep pushing your back into the wall because once you're in pike phalanx, pathfinding works differently. So if you have your back against the wall, and let's say the wall is a cliff that you can climb onto, if you just tell the unit to go on top of that cliff, it won't just try to go around as every other unit would. It will try to back itself into that cliff and basically face through it, which it sometimes will, which is a bug. That's how Pike, for example, got on top of the temple at Thermopylae, the famous screenshots. Yeah, which is another issue. You can just grind your ass towards a cliff, and there's no way to flank you, essentially. Unless you're multi-adders and you can apply somehow left and right flank in that situation, which is extremely difficult to do. And then fear on top of it, and then you will ride the pike phalanx. But if it's Leonidas, battle cry, nope. Or it's hold the line now. I don't know. They have skills that increase morale, or even share wine, which also increases morale and counters fear.
Yeah. Well, also, like I said, with control, right? It gives, like, if I'm an infantry player, right? Like we touched on this, right? You need 2 people to beat a pike player, basically, which is a huge advantage to begin with, right? Let's say I'm an infantry player, and I'm not going to say I'm the slowest infantry player. I'm not going to be like, oh, I'm a heavy infantry that just can't do anything, right? Well, I'm not going to be a super fast barbarian, right? Let's just go with like a medium infantry. So like a Carthage sword after tier 5, obviously their tier 5 is very fast, but like an after tier 5 Carthage sword or just medium Roman swords, right? So if I'm coming up against a pike player in a city, I've already lost. I need to have a range player or I just can't touch him. Like he fills up the whole road, and I either spend 2 minutes going around him to flank him, or I go to another.
He turns around in 2 seconds, so negated.
And then I can go to another flag, right? I can just reposition. Well, I just wasted 1 minute to 2 minutes of running across the map while he's sitting there capping points. And then, let's say best case scenario, he's not in the street that he can block all of, or he's out in the wilds or something like that, right? Like plains or a forest or something, right? And which he shouldn't be there because he's has a brain. But let's say he is for some reason, and I can actually flank him. Well, he can just backpedal away, helicopter the pikes into me, even if I somehow get that crisp side charge on him. In that 1v1 scenario, he has 3 units. Worst case scenario, he can just butt them up against each other and make a triangle that I can't touch. Sure, you could say, well, you can go around him, right? And it's like, but it just, not only does he have so much map control, he just has player control, right? Like, it's like elephants too, right? you have to have 2 people to take them down, right? So you have 2 people tied up here for how long, right? Especially pikes who can survive for a long time with raised shields. Let's say I get that perfect charge in, right? Like my archers had him get into raised shields. I get in there and I'm actually fighting him. Well, if he's Leonidas, he just shield bashes me and drops him anyway. And I'm like, so I did all this work to get into melee to finally counter these things, and the dude presses one button and then lawn mows half my unit because he has no, fatigue or anything going at that point. And, he just drops the pike, and every model of mine that's touching his just not only gets pushed back, even though they're already a foot away from the guy and there's no room to drop the pike, he just gets lawn mowed because pike damage.
Yep, and that's another factor that I wanted to touch upon is that, if you fuck up as a player trying to deal with a pike unit, unless you get that perfect charge and rout the unit immediately, or not allow them to shield bash after you do the melee plus ranged combo tactic. But if you fuck up and pike player gets to drop pike phalanx on top of your unit, you suffer heavy casualties, right? So there's not like, oh, okay, well, I'll get him next time. There won't be, well, in this new game it will be because you'll respawn, right? But you're losing a lot of men, a lot of momentum, a lot of everything. Well, the pike player, if he fucks up, well, in ideal world, right, when the shit is fixed, he wouldn't have the shield bash into pike phalanx, right? But as long as he gets the pike phalanx off, he's mostly fine. Even if he gets flanked and doesn't get immediately routed within 2-3 seconds, yeah, he'll just spin and be fine and still deal a lot of damage while fighting back. And yeah, as we said, they're very similar to elephants in that sense that they need 2 versus 1 at least to be dealt with, and that also frees up a player from the pike player to do something else, to flank you, for example, to intercept you as you're trying to deal with pikes or cap your point. And the pikes, as opposed to elephants, instead of being really good at making people run away from them and trying to cap the points, pikes are really good at holding the points. And well, they're also very good at making people run away because nobody can face them if they approach you frontally, right? But by moving forward, they are a little bit exposing themselves to flanking, but not that much. Especially if you're talking about a map like Salernum. Like, if you just plant a pike unit, one pike unit in Salernum, in one of the streets, that's huge map control, basically for free, and it doesn't require that much skill. You just planted a pike unit in a street, and that's it. Just make sure you switch between ratios and pike phalanx correctly, and you're fine. So that's why that window of opportunity that is created by switching those abilities needs to be higher and consistent, so that players can actually use that tactic. It's still a very difficult tactic. It requires coordination between 2 different players, which not always you will have, because if it's not your party member that you're on voice that you can actually coordinate it with, it is very difficult to coordinate that with a random person, because you have no idea if that is also what that person wants to do, or if he even is aware of that way of dealing with pikes in the first place. So yeah, well, pike player, you just solo, I'm just gonna stand here and you have to deal with it, basically.
Yes, I do have one solution, potential solution, just to bounce off some ideas. So, missile block with pikes. You see, unlike a Roman testudo, which is made to block everything, raising a shield should not be as effective as a full-blown testudo. I think you can see where I'm going with this. If it becomes 100%, and in higher tiers it does become 100% and 70% at tier 10, and because missile block works as a flat percentage and keeps on increasing, that just, a flat increase versus percentage increase will inherently be unbalanced. Why don't we just reduce that? Why does raising shield block you 100%? If it doesn't block it, then you can have ranged units will whittle the enemy down, just like they did at 1066 in England. What was that? The Battle of
Hastings.
Hastings. Yes, thank you very much. At the Battle of Hastings, they raise their shields. They get hit from the ground. They lower their shields. They get hit from the head. So it should never be 100% in case of raised shields, in my opinion. And that would fix the problem. It would take a long time to whittle them down, but they will get whittled down.
Yeah, but well, the time is also a factor and a huge issue of how long it actually takes to deal with a pike player that way. But I guess at least that's a safe approach, right? Again, not always, because the pike player may just have his own ranged player supporting him and firing at your ranged units, so they cannot just stand there and shoot pikes. Yep, so
that's what I was about to say. It's not a perfect world. You're not 2v1ing him at all times, right?
Yeah, yes, that's why we are bringing up that 2v1 point, which so many people are just always forgetting when you get into arguments about balance, right? It's, oh, elephants are overpowered. It's like, no, elephants are not overpowered because you can always 5v1 them. Excuse me, what? Well, you know, you just take pike unit, a Germanicus unit, and you take a javelin unit, and then maybe you add your heavy artillery, and then elephants are dead. Therefore, elephants are not overpowered. Are you listening to yourself? It's a 10v10 game? Hello? So if 4 players or 5 players are occupied with an elephant, the other part of the battlefield is 9v5, 9v6. So many people keep forgetting about that in their arguments, and it just immediately makes their argument invalid because you're not taking the whole picture into account.
You're absolutely right.
Therefore, nothing is overpowered because everything can be just 10v1 and dealt with.
Exactly. So adding a non-100 missile block to pikemen will solve this problem because in this case the range will still be able to counter it, but pikes will do their job of holding the line. After all, they're not supposed to push the enemies away; they're supposed to hold that line. So they still manage to do it. You still fight in the shade, so to speak. But even in the movie 300, they got whittled down.
No, they didn't. They had 100% missile block. Unless,
when they did that
apart from that very last scene. Apart from that, they had 100% missile block. And I made a few memes about it. Anyway, about the 100% missile block chance thing. I don't know if that's a really good solution about just lowering that, because if you have 90%, you're still blocking fucking 90% of missiles, and the percent is not good enough to whittle them down. But it's all about enabling that tactic or forcing them into missile block if either fight in the shade or raise shields position, so that you can attack it, because they therefore don't have available the pike phalanx, right? So maybe just lower the base missile block. So instead of being like 60, 70, 80, whatever it is on whichever tier, right, you lower it to 30, 40, right? And then you have to be in that position if you want to deal with ranged units. But anyway, the other solution that I would rather see is just lowering the angles, because the Testudo having 270 degree protection or even more makes sense, right? They're literally, the only weak spot is their very ass. But in case of raised shields, it shouldn't be like that. But I've recently watched my old videos where I was playing slingers or ranged or the ranged units. But I vividly remember one slinger battle where I got behind a pike unit and I shot it from the side. It wasn't like completely straight from the back, but well, I was behind them, right? And they were facing forward toward my team. And they still blocked 98% of my missiles. Yeah, so they also have like maybe not 270 degree, but definitely more than 180. So they don't only defend from all the missiles coming directly in front of them, but they also have some defense from the back to the sides, right? If you shoot them directly from the back, sure, they'll take all the hits, but that's very often very difficult to do, especially with pikes, who like to just sit in.
I mean, if they're back facing you, you could just charge them with infantry, right? Like.
Well, it depends whether you're ranged unit or melee unit, right? It's, you know, chaos of the battlefield, so it's not to delve into that too deep. But yeah, I was behind them, technically, shooting them from the side, like from 190 to 200 degree, and they still blocked everything, pretty much, apart from few lucky stones that got through. So yeah, I'll just lower the degree from which raised shields can block, and that would also serve to, you know, maybe not fix the problem but make it less annoying. And obviously there are many solutions to many issues, and you combine all of them, and then maybe pikes are fixed overall. And let's also remember that before Arena went offline, after the wargaming period, right? They started working on a pike rework, and they added pike fatigue. So even though if you got that pike phalanx down and started mowing the units down, if the units that were attacking the pikes fought for long enough, the pike would get fatigue, and then you could break through that fatigue. But even that fatigue thing didn't really solve the problem. There was like one counter where you go with Sula and you go into Fortify, and then your melee defense is so high that the pike phalanx cannot get hits, even if it's not exhausted. So yeah, it is about numbers in that case, but overall the mechanic, well, it was improved, but it wasn't fixed. But now that we got to China, they just removed that rework and came back to how it was before the reworking started. But yeah, I think they did it because the purpose of those two tests, the Pioneer tests, were to test the new game mode and not pikes. And the pike rework was very much experimental, so they wanted something more familiar, more stable in terms of balance, to just test the new game mode rather than the results of the tests being skewed by pikes being, well, they're still OP, so that also skewers the results, but whatever. In the direction they didn't really know that well, right? Because pikes were broken for so long, they still are. So at least that's the environment they know. You've got a lot of numbers that they can compare from the old mode and the new mode, with the pikes being the same. So anybody wants to add anything about pikes? Folks, you've been sitting very quiet throughout the entire podcast. Are you shy?
No, man.
Mm-hmm.
Well, to be honest, I can't really say much about like the pikes in general for like.
Haven't you dealt with them as a Fox player, or just avoid them because they're too scary?
Not just like the usual stuff I do with them, like try to bait out their phalanx and then engage them. Doesn't really change all that much, to be honest.
Well, if
like,
you were to go alone, then they can just turn around. And even if you try to surround them 3v1, the thing is that even if you just go 3v1, free Folks units or free any melee units, which Folks are really good because they're fast, even 3v1, there's a very high chance that pikes are going to win. Yeah. Just 1v3 engagement, even if they're surrounded, they're just gonna spin to win. They're not gonna rout, and they're just gonna kill you, even if they're surrounded and outnumbered.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the very fundamental issue with pikes. Okay.
Yeah, it all depends on like the team composition as well, though. Like if the enemy pike player is out of position, it doesn't really matter that much that he can like spin to win, basically.
I mean, the problem is that they can pretty much always spin to win. They would be, you need to be really, really, really out of position to not be able to do that.
Yeah, or like bait out their fucking their phalanx mode. Like if they go out of phalanx, they have like 6 or 7 seconds cooldown on the skill, and in those 6 to 7 seconds, I can charge them and route them, and then it's like useless.
Well, unless he's Leonidas and he gets unlimited morale.
Yeah.
And if he's Leonidas, he just should bash pike phalanx anyway.
Yeah, after 6 seconds, yes.
Yeah.
But like pike players, or like pikes in general, are not really a priority target for Foxes. So, I mean, sure, if I see them and I see, I have teammates around and we can deal with them quickly, then let's do it. But like a pike player alone is not going to win the match. Usually.
Debatable, especially given how much map control they have, and especially now with the new game mode. You can,
that's why I'm
you can
saying,
single-handedly win an entire flank and therefore secure 2 cap points, which is a huge advantage.
That's why I said like I can't really say much about it because I haven't played like that many matches on the Chinese version. So I'm not sure. I have to play more matches to actually like have a definite answer.
I actually noticed that in the show match. Like one team, I think, had 1 or 2 pike players on it, and I'm not playing. I did play. I think I played Romans throughout the thing. Yeah, I played Romans, so I was a bit slower than barbarians, right? So if I try and run past the guy, he'll probably rapid advance into me, right? So I can't just ignore the dude. And if I go into him, I'm just gonna die. So I basically have to sit there and slowly backpedal away from this guy if he wants to come at me, and hope that my range units can defeat his range unit. Like my entire like let's say I had 10 options to do right before, I now have one option. It's pray to God my range beats their range so that I have something to deal with these guys afterwards. Because and that's of course not counting Cav, that's not counting other players, that's not counting any of that, right? I'm just like, I went from being like, oh, the world is my oyster, to all right, well, I got to do this one thing and just cross my fingers, hope my teammate can pull this off.
Yeah, but even if that range duel that you were talking about goes evenly, more or less, then, well,
I'm left in a 1v1.
your ranged unit is, your ranged player is almost dead himself, so not gonna help much.
Right?
Yeah, he will be just too insignificant for the pikes to care about, so yeah, it goes back to 1v1 anyway.